Hi guys! Today, in this video, we will go over the book of Philippians and Colossians. Both letters are prison epistles that Paul wrote them while he was in prison. Let's begin with the book of Philippians. The book of Philippians can be broken into three parts. First, Paul explains his situation in Rome. Second, Paul exhorts the church to unity by telling them the example of Jesus and challenges them. And lastly, Paul thanks them for their support. Paul begins his letter with a prayer that he thanks God and the Philippians' generosity and faithfulness. And Paul continues on with his imprisonment, that whether he is executed or not, both are good for him, because if he dies, he will be with Jesus, and if he is released, then he can keep ministry. Then chapter 2 begins with the so-called Christ hymn, which contains very important theology in the short poem. Paul urges them to follow Jesus' example because that is a way of living. And Paul gives examples who are living out in this way, which are Timothy and Epaphroditus. Then Paul continues on by giving his example of how he was before Jesus and after Jesus. And here Paul tells one important thing, and that is our citizenship is in heaven, not on this earth. And Paul challenges them to live the example of Jesus Christ. And Paul concludes his message with thanksgiving again. The message is that the believers ought to follow the example of Jesus, which is unity, humility, and awareness of the love of Jesus. And that is what the book of Philippians is about. Now let's talk about the book of Colossians. Colossians can be broken into two parts. The first part consists of theological instruction, and the second part, ethics. Paul begins his letter with prayer and thanksgiving for the Colossians. Then Paul talks about the hymn to Christ, which talks about who Jesus is, by using the language in the Old Testament. Jesus is the author and king of creation. Not only that, Jesus is the one who brings the new creation, those who believe in him. Here we also see the image of head and the body, that Jesus is the head of the body, which is the church. Then Paul urges them to walk in Christ rather than following after philosophy, human tradition, or elementary principle of the world. And Paul talks about Christian living in Christ, which contains teachings of you need to kill your sin completely, relationship in the church, and the family relationship. And Paul concludes with final greetings. So the message of the book of Colossians is to help us to have a strong Christian foundation in a world that is filled with false teachings. And that is what the book of Colossians is all about.